Good afternoon, good evening, my fellow YouTubers, Facebookians. Welcome to another edition of Living Simply and Fun. I'm your host, Aries, aka Rita, and this is Aaron.
Well, this is in response to a video where Rita got barbecued yet again for attempting to defend herself against the person who barbecued her, saying she wasn't disabled. Then she got barbecued by a guy named Thomas Jalopy.
Jalopy.
No, it's Jalopy. That is not jalopy, okay? Sorry. He's not a broken down car. Pronounce things. You do have a problem with pronunciation. Part of her disability, by the way. Now, can I read what he had to say?
Yes.
Even though she deleted the comment because she's upset by it, it says, "What incredibly racist things you said in this video. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. The other guy may not have been right, but that gives you no right to place blame on anyone else. I am not." And this upset her. That's part of her disability, but she's been called racist before. The thing is, she's not racist. I've met racist people. I've met people who want to see other races dead. I've met people who have said they're... What is that?
Email program. Don't worry, I can answer.
I've heard very incredibly racist things from people. Rita is not racist. Now, what you may be identifying as racism is probably her disability, where she has taken things that other people have said to her and misinterpreted them or said them in a wrong manner. Rita, for one, is a person who will use the wrong word for the wrong thing. Now, I can't think of any versions offhand, examples. See, even there, I use the wrong word, versions. Example is the more proper word. But she has used words like indubitably to mean, what are you talking about? Like, you know, it's a questioning term to when she said it at one point, and what it means is, you know, I agree with you. She doesn't always have a grasp and knowledge of the English language so well. She's got essentially a 5th grade education, and she not even, because she went through special education courses. Special education courses, even at 8th grade, are still teaching 2nd and 3rd grade stuff, honestly.
Really? Does that include shopping for groceries?
Yeah,
Which
see,
I've never seen.
This is one thing that they taught to her special education course. How to shop for groceries. This is something nobody's taught in school. Maybe in kindergarten they're taught how to shop by using a play cart, and they go through and they put stuff in the play cart like, you know, teddy bears and stuff. You know, there's shopping carts made for little kids at grocery stores, and parents teach this stuff. In this case, they taught the kids in 8th grade how to go shopping. They taught the kids in 8th grade how to look up addresses and phone numbers in a phone book, and were given a list of things to look up. This is never taught to normal kids. So, she dropped out just as she was mainstreamed in 9th grade. She was mainstreamed in 9th grade with an education that essentially taught her how to shop for groceries and look up addresses and phone numbers in a phone book.
Well, don't forget, we had to go to restaurants,
and taught how to bowl and how to order at restaurants. Okay? This is the type of stuff she was taught. All of a sudden, she's thrown into having to do algebra, American history, and various other things, such as mathematics. Oh, well, I already did mathematics, but reading, which her ability to read was essentially based on phone books and backs of labels on packages. Yes, it's a basic reading ability, but her comprehension wasn't very good. And, of course, she couldn't handle school, so she ended up dropping out. Her mom even permitted it because there was no way that she was going to be able to handle the education that they were trying to throw at her with no preparation prior. Could you imagine having to take high school classes without ever having taken anything between 1st and 8th grade? Essentially being allowed to play all day?
Well, I was taught cursive between 2nd and 5th grade, and I know cursive pretty well. My handwriting's sloppy, but that's what they put us into.
You want to know how her handwriting is, since she brings up her handwriting? Her handwriting looks like a first grader trying to attempt to write their first letters, and that really wide bar stuff that's got the little slash in it with the kind of grayish brown paper, and the kids are supposed to write like cat and dog. Well, her letters are just like first or second graders. She's never technically learned to write proper. And I do think that they tried to force her to write with the wrong hand, too. But that's beside the point. Now, getting into how she misconstrues things. A lot of people have told her that the problem with Social Security is that there are all sorts of people on the system who use the system. And they tell her that the people who are using the system are illegal immigrants who come up here and they injure their arm at their job or whatever and then claim they can't go back because they were here legally as a migrant farm worker, and now they're here technically illegally, but they end up getting money because they can't be sent home until they're healed of their injury. That is one thing that the government does do. I know this because we live in an area where about 60 to 70% of the population in the area is illegal immigrants and migrant farm workers, and they do somehow manage to get government funding. Don't ask me how, because I don't even know how. But I've seen a mother driving a Corvette whose kids are wearing trashy secondhand clothes.
I've seen it too.
That have holes in it. And she's sitting there wearing like a fur coat and diamond earrings and smelling of like Chanel No. 5, and obviously has no time for her little brats. They were obviously mistreated. And she drives a Corvette around. Of course, she drives a minivan when she goes shopping because she likes to show off her little rugrats, because apparently they're trophy rats who end up getting them excess money because they'd get paid not disability, but welfare for each one of those kids.
It's like $600 per kid.
And instead of spending the money on the kids, she ends up spending it on herself. That's why she drives a Corvette, wears a fur coat, and has diamond earrings, and wears Chanel No. 5 or whatever.
And this is service dog mopping.
And this is the type of stuff that ends up making her look bad. So, of course, when she's trying to tell people this, she doesn't know how to say it, so it comes out sounding almost racist. But all she's doing is reiterating what other people have said.
Or seen.
So, if anything, the people that need to be called racist are maybe the family, but the family's actually basing things off of fact. This is fact that in this community there are a lot of illegal immigrants, and I'm sorry, they happen to be Mexican. That doesn't necessarily
Hispanic.
That doesn't. No, they're Mexican.
Whoa.
Latino is anybody from the Southern American countries.
I didn't know that. See.
The fact of the matter is that the people in
Hispanic,
our community...
then.
No, because Hispanic, again, refers to anybody who happens to speak Spanish who's from the Latin American countries.
See, I didn't know that.
Mexico happens to refer to only people who come from Mexico itself. These are actually, if you want to be even more technical, people, most of the community happens to come from an area of Mexico called Jalisco. So if you want to, you could actually say Jaliscoans. Because I don't know how you'd actually pronounce that. It's like Ohioans. If all the people in Washington essentially relocate from Ohio in our area, we could say our area is full of Ohidians or Ohioans. Her mother said Ohidian. I'm from Ohio, so...
Well, you're a Texican by
I'm
blood.
technically a Texican by birth. I was born a Texican. No, because my family was technically from Ohio.
No, your family is technically from Kentucky.
Okay, well, my grandmother and grandfather, etc., came from Kentucky. My mother's parents. But, of course, there's those who will end up saying, well, you came from England. And, yes, my family mostly did come from an area called the Isle of Man. But... Again, this is going way back into history, and it is irrelevant entirely to this
And where
video.
did you come from? I came from Tibet.
The entire point that I'm trying to say here, though, is the term Mexican shouldn't be considered a racist term when it's referring to people from the country of Mexico, and in our area, it is the Jalisco area. And I'm sure that there might be a person or two from our area who might see this video. And no, it's not a matter of being racist. A lot of them are sweethearts. A lot of them are kind, and many of them are hardworking individuals.
I bless the blacks pretty much because they're really nice people that I've seen and grew up with. And But I said there is some that are baby factories.
Again, usually when people start spouting off about how disabled people are second-hand citizens or second-class citizens and need to learn their place, etc., a lot of the time, and I'm not talking about cigar addict in particular, I'm just saying people who say things like that. This is a generalization. And an assumption. And assumptions and generalizations are usually where people end up getting in trouble when they're talking. But when it comes to Rita, she knows that a lot of people are referring to videos where you have this black woman with 16 kids saying, well, who's going to pay for my children? Somebody owes me a living. Well, nobody owes her a living. Nobody needs to pay for her children. She shouldn't have had them if she couldn't afford them. But unfortunately, the disabled get a bad rap due to the fact that there are people like this. And a lot of them, you see videos of these people being arrested or something, and a lot of the times they are black. It does not mean that Rita's trying to be racist by saying black people. Unfortunately, they give a bad name, and not all of them. This is what
I would like to make a statement.
This is something where culture, I'm trying to explain,
yes.
This is something where our culture, our media, our government, and our tabloids and our fake newspapers like Glenn Beck's The Blaze ends up painting a picture of very racial problems using and abusing the system. And those problems are turned around on another disabled person who happens to be Caucasian and white, who happens to have a real disability, who's attempting to defend herself, doesn't know how, and is trying to reiterate what the media and our social bulwark is essentially pushed on her, and she doesn't know how to reiterate it. So you're sitting there saying she's racist. She's not racist for attempting to defend herself and trying to use what is considered a norm within the community and explain. But it comes out wrong, and that's her disability showing. So what you're doing is telling her to stop being a disabled freak because she's defending herself for being disabled. You can't knock somebody's disability out of them. You can't look at somebody who's disabled, hit them, and they're going to be fine and be like, oh, I'm very sorry for the problems that I have caused, and my mental condition is much better now. Thank you so much for hitting me. Nobody had ever hit me before because I was being a pompous, arrogant asshole unintentionally because of my disability. Now I'm fine. That won't work. It's like Dennis Leary. I wanted to smack the hell out of him when he said, you know what? Somebody needs to beat the shit out of this person. I'll be like, oh my God, nobody ever hit me before. Oh, that made me feel so much better. And now I can stop crying and blaming everybody else. She's not blaming everybody else. What she's trying to say is, other people are blaming her because of other people who, and that is the truth.
I wanted to make a statement. For example, there's a person that we know, we will keep names out of it, that accuse us of not being disabled, yet she turns around and she says her community, she's a white woman, by the way,
this is probably getting into where I'm talking about.
Yeah, hold on, I'm not racist, and you know what she said, we basically shouldn't be getting the benefits, it should be going to the other thing. The point is, and then we get the flack for it when you go down the street and hear these people complaining about it.
All right, stop, Rita. Let me talk. What she's talking about is several times in the community that we live in, which happens to be a predominantly Mexican, Jalisco area, Mexico, population. And we happen to have a friend, a very nice friend, whose husband is a very nice person, who married a person who's Mexican. And she, like many others, has iterated that people like me and Rita don't deserve anything because the Hispanics need it far more. Sorry, I said Hispanics, and I'm generalizing the population. The Mexicans in this community deserve it far more because they're far more needy.
And she also said the blacks should all be down the toilet.
And she has actually said that if there's any blacks that come to this community, they don't deserve it either because the Mexicans are in more need. And we've heard this from people in our building who say that we don't deserve to live here, that we should be kicked out because other people need to be living here. Now, of course, this has absolutely nothing to do with Rita trying to defend herself, saying she's disabled. But this is where her mind takes her on a tangent, and she ends up ranting and raving and complaining about everything because her mind gets going. She could make a 5-minute video.
I did.
But
last night on my own channel.
Stop. She could make a 5-minute video. Unfortunately, the way her mind works is she starts looping things. And she starts trying to use examples, and as she starts using this example and that example, it leads to this example and that example, which leads to this one and that one. And by the time she's done, she's nowhere near the topic she started with. This is part of her disability. So, you want to get into saying that she's a racist? I'm sorry, she's not. It's community that is. It's reverse racism, as there is a lot of it in this community. And all she's doing is, well, she's ending up messing up. And you know what? I'm not doing much better because, honestly, whenever anybody ends up talking about racism, they can very easily end up looking like a racist. I'm sorry, I have a lot of black friends. In the past, I don't live in a community where there's any blacks now, and my former friends, I haven't been able to find them on Facebook or anything, or stay in touch with them. Some of them have passed on. I have plenty of people who are Hispanic, Latino that I have been friends with or am friends with, and I have plenty of Asians that I am friends with and get along with. The real thing is, how do you look at another person? And to me, another person is another person. I'm sorry, but I don't look at color of skin. And I've been told that even saying that is racist, because when the moment that you mention skin color, you're getting into a ground of racism. And this video really wasn't supposed to be about racism either, but this is something I noticed when I was living in Cleveland. A person who sits there, a black man, who's wearing a shirt that says something like Black Power, and it's got a fist on it, and it says Black Power, and they're wearing their pants around their just below their ass with their boxers showing, with a pistol tucked into their side, and they're talking in a language that doesn't even sound like English, and then they sit there and call you racist because you don't want to be in the same room with them. Why would you want to be in a room with a person who obviously looks like they're about to commit a crime, or looks like they're obviously uneducated and you're an educated person? Just because you don't want to be friends with this person or pat them on the back and say, here, have $20. Go buy yourself a coffee or something. That people don't act that way. And unfortunately, I noticed in Cleveland a lot of people thought, or seem to think, that they deserve something that they weren't getting when they looked like this. When they're sitting there and they're like, yo, motherfucker. I'm sorry, pardon my French, but when a person comes up to you and says, yo, that is not being polite, that's not being kind, that's not being caring.
It'd be like my friend Angela would say, it'd be rude.
At that point, I don't think I'm going to offer my hand and say, hey, man, how you doing? Because that's not me. To me, I'm going to be sitting there saying, who the hell's this person to be addressing me in such a manner?
I'm going to slip out and get a coffee.
And then they sit there and say, you racist because you didn't take my hand. I'm sorry, I'm not racist because I didn't take your hand. You started with an insult. An insult, or verbally accosting me, or being vulgar, is not something I'm going to take to and say, hey, you might be a cool person. I'm going to offer you a job. I'm not in a position to offer anyone a job. But I don't know what's expected of me. Now, if a person comes up to me and they're like, yes, hello, how are you, sir? I'm going to treat them with respect and kindness because they deserve respect. To me, it's a matter of respect. And if a person can't respect me and can't act as a respectable person, then I can't respect them. But this is less about me, but I'm trying to talk about racism here. See, I'm not even able to follow where I'm going entirely. Rita, of course, wants to make a comment.
It has to do with what he says. Now, I've had people accuse me of being racist on certain grounds, which Aaron has seen, and people have asked him why. At times when they've extended their hand and I've shaked it, not knowing the person, even if they're black or Hispanic, I'd go and use a baby wipe on my hand because I'm OCD, and they thought I was racist.
Yes, and Rita can't even pet her dog without washing her hands. If I've handled the PlayStation controller and then she wants to use it, she's kind of got to wipe it down. I don't know, somebody somewhere taught her that germs were horribly bad, and if you handle or touch anything, you need to wash your hands. And that stuck in her head so much that she needs to wash her hands no matter what happened. This isn't a matter of racism. It's a matter of she's got a complex that started as a child. So if you don't know her and you happen to be another race, then you might take that as a major offense when she pulls out a baby wipe and starts wiping her hand off as soon as she's done shaking her hand. Heck, you might even be offended if you're a white person who just shook her hand and she did that. It doesn't matter, but one thing that this community, our population, needs to stop doing is stop assuming things about other people. And honestly, this video should never be made. Because when you try to say anything about racism, you essentially become a racist person. Everyone will find some reason to say, you're racist. You're racist because you said this. You're racist because you didn't say this. You're racist because you even talked about racism. And I am probably the least likely to be racist in the entire world. Why? I am friendly towards every single person. Oh, but being friendly towards a person doesn't count as not being racist. I forgot that. I've also forgotten, though, the fact that, I have severe social anxiety, and if I happen to meet a person, I usually will not interact with other people very often on the street. I don't like to go out. So if I don't interact with somebody, that's also usually considered a matter of racism. What was I trying to say? This topic's just very hard for me because I'm afraid of the comments. I'm afraid somebody's going to call me a racist because I talk about generalizations that other people make. And the fact that she misinterprets these generalizations that other people have made, that other people have iterated, and twist it to the fact that I'm saying that. And I'm not saying that. I have quoted things that have said that, but that's a matter of using somebody else's perception. And honestly, whenever anybody uses somebody else's perception, they're not using their own mind. But somebody who doesn't really understand the workings of things is going to go based off of other people's perceptions. That's what I'm attempting to try to say here, I guess. And I'm getting very roundabout because I feel that I'm not doing a good enough job explaining it, and I feel that I'm digging myself a hole just by talking about it. And I'm trying to defend Rita here against a person who's claimed that she's racist. That is something that hurts her because she's not. Talking about her, though, another thing that happens with her is that she gets very defensive about things. Like, if I tell her something and she doesn't believe it, or she wants to believe her own thoughts in her head, then she will almost get belligerent and angry at me. She will start screaming and yelling, cutting me off, and switching the topic to, it's my fault. I'm wrong. And this is just how she reacts. She's like a little kid who she takes some kid's toy and she's trying to defend that the toy is hers. She won't hear another person's telling her you're wrong. She will continue to defend herself because she doesn't want to be in trouble.
Excuse me, but I did win the argument with the Canadian healthcare.
We're not going there.
Well, we're not, but I'm just telling you.
And you won, but you didn't win. See, she's gotten me off on a tangent, and she's got to bring this up right in the middle of the video, and now I need to defend myself too. So often we feel that we have to defend ourselves, and that's probably not a good thing. But we had an argument, and I said I thought that somewhere around early 2000s to late 2000s that the Canadian healthcare bill that gave Canadians free healthcare took effect. And she said no, her uncle had said that it was going...
Mom's boyfriend's brothers
Well,
Married
mom's
to
boyfriend's brother,
Maybe
close enough to an
brother.
uncle because
Not an uncle.
he lived with your mother for 30 years, essentially,
Off
off
and
and on. He was essentially a father figure, and his brother would therefore be your uncle.
He's not my
And you're-
father, so technically you can't claim that one.
Fine, stepfather, step
You
uncle.
can't be
Okay.
stepfather
Stop!
or anyone. He's
Stop!
just a person.
Stop! You're going off on a tangent again while I'm just trying to make a simple explanation.
Just explain.
See, this is something that happens all the time with us. Anyways, apparently she heard from him that the healthcare system, there was something wrong with it, even though it was supposed to cover everything. This was back in the early 80s or whatever, when she was like 7 or 8 years old. Of course, this makes her remember that the healthcare system was free, and she said it started somewhere back in the early 80s, is what she originally said. Of course, looking into it, she found out it started way back in the early 60s, and it started to become more globalized in Canada up to 64, and there was various amendments made, and the amendments seemed to happen all the time. Well, of course, I have no reason to know Canadian law, and I have no reason to know much about the Canadian healthcare system. I mean, I've looked into it briefly, but not enough to know where it started or the history of it. So she looks up the history of it and says, well, you know, she's right because it started back in the 60s, so it's much older. But in reading so, she found that there was a major decision around the early 2000s that would have been national news. And as a kid growing up, I would have heard this. And so I assume, not knowing anything about it, that this is when it roughly started because it was national news at the time. And of course, shortly after, it became major talk in our political structure. And that's roughly when we started talking about it. So seeing that we started talking about it around that point, at least what appeared to me, because, heck, growing up, I'd never heard about it. You know, the healthcare system was always considered flawed, but universal healthcare wasn't really talked about. So, of course, I assumed that it started around early 2000. And I was technically, in some ways, right because they were in the news and our talks about it started around the same time. So, although I was wrong, I found out where I thought that I was right. So, yes, I was wrong. And no, I'm not technically right. But she wasn't technically right either, and she only proved where I thought that I had heard it. So, she just disproved the fact that I thought was a fact. I don't know if you're following what I'm saying. But, anyways, getting on with this, the simple point to, I don't know his name again. I'm sorry.
Thomas
Jalapy.
Jalapy?
Mr. Jalapy. I am very sorry that what you find is her disability being racist is really honestly just her disability attempting to iterate what other people have told her and doing it in a manner in which you've perceived it to be racist. She's not a racist, sir. And unfortunately, this problem has come up before, but it was made up about her by somebody else in an attempt to cause her physical harm, and it caused legal action that needed to be taken, and it's very hurtful for her to be called a racist, and thus I've needed to make a video defending her, and I am very sorry if I have offended anyone, because that is not my intention. I intend to offend absolutely no one, and I'll guarantee there'll be somebody out there who will find that just because I'm white talking about racism, I'm racist. And I guess you're free to your own thoughts and beliefs on that, but I wish in this day and age people would be polite about what they say. I wish people would try to understand the situation before trying to make a public debacle. And there's a friend of mine recently that I'm even getting upset with because I know that they go out trolling on purpose and they try to offend and upset people. This is something that our community does not need. This is something that people shouldn't be doing. To cause somebody else mental stress, mental harm, when they're already got mental problems. Heck, even a person who doesn't have mental problems, this is very wrong. It is very wrong. You are not part of the solution, You are part of the problem when you start going off on people and trying to upset them on purpose. I'm not saying that Mr. Jalopy was trying to hurt Rita on purpose by calling her a racist. I'm sure that what he saw, or what he thought he saw, he assumed was a matter of racism. And maybe, I don't know how it could have been handled any better anyways. Honestly, I don't think she should have deleted the comment, but she did need to defend herself. And the best way to defend it is have somebody try to explain how her brain works, which isn't very well. And unfortunately, it seems like I'm doing nothing but putting her down, and that's not my intention either. And I'm afraid that she's going to take offense with me trying to explain things. But if she was trying to explain things to you, she'd probably end up digging her grave even deeper.
No, I just tell the guy out of my own mind.
You'd call,
open mouth, insert foot. No, open mouth, insert foot. This is how I work. And I'd probably say something I didn't mean, like go to hell, sir.
Or you're a pompous douchebag. This is the type of thing that she does. She gets very defensive and oftentimes gets into name slinging because she doesn't know how to defend herself. So if you end up hearing her say something like,
I called a guy a jackwagon in my video.
Yes, she called a person a jackwagon. Name slinging is something that little kids do because they don't have a response. For instance, somebody says, well, you're such a bully because you hit him, and he doesn't know how to respond, so the bully essentially either does more bully tactics or ends up saying, shut the fuck up, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, you skanky hoe. And it's like, how is a little kid a skanky hoe? They haven't had sex with anybody yet. At least, hopefully, they haven't. And unfortunately, in this world, that's becoming more and more prevalent that children are having sex. And, it used to be in the past.
Sad little happened. World we live in. But I got Kevorkian and Scoff.
Okay. See, again, a tangent that doesn't quite fit. But serious conversation and joking in the background. I'm sorry if you find a disabled person to be disabled. And if you want to start telling a disabled person that they're a bad person when they're actually not a bad person because you don't know them, you're just another person who's making assumptions about another individual and taking things out of context, which so many do. We need to stop doing that as a society. And I do it myself even. It's something that's very hard to not do. It's very hard to live in another person's shoes even for 5 minutes because you think by seeing a person talk or walk that you understand them, and nobody really understands another individual unless they've been with that person a very long time, and even then they still don't necessarily understand that individual or still can't stand being around that individual. There are times when Rita's been so difficult on me, I want to disappear for a week and not even see her, but I feel like I have to take care of her. I cook her meals for her because she can't cook. I do a lot of cleaning for her because she's not very good at cleaning. She does her best, but so often her countertops are coated in coffee stains, and it's like, how much coffee did you drink in the last 24 hours to make this many stains?
I sometimes clean up those. I try my best.
You try.
However,
she's very good at trying. But so often she needs help with so much that
I handle my own letters and emails.
I feel responsible, and I have to come by to help take care of her. Even if I don't want to, it would be wrong of me not to, because I know that she wouldn't be able to handle it.
Then the people in the audience would say you need to put me in a group home or something.
But she can, she can handle cooking TV dinners, but if she's going to eat anything that's technically healthier for her or a real meal, she really needs me around. I mean, TV dinners are not a living. By the way, TV dinners are more expensive usually than cooking the type of meals that I provide.
But I do buy my own groceries, by the way. He's just providing me know-how of cooking.
And trying to cook cheaper saves us money so that we actually have some money to do some things with. And a lot of people I've heard say, well, you can't eat very healthy by cooking for yourself. The prepared meals are the way to go, but even prepared meals are junk.
Yeah, like Schwann's.
But it tends to be much more expensive to try to cook for yourself, unless you know what you're doing, and I do. Anyways, that's again getting off on a tangent here that we shouldn't be.
Say to this Thomas Jalopy,
Yes.
The reason I
I hope we're pronouncing that right.
I thought it might be like jalopy.
She thinks it's jalopy, but there's no O in it.
Jalopy, okay. See, I have a pronunciation problem.
Jala.
I don't want to get into my disabilities. Now, I'm disabled, yes. The reason I did that last rant video, Mr. Jalopy, was to prove to Cigar Addict that we aren't lowly second-class piece of crap citizens that are freeloading off his dime.
And I never actually saw the video, but I can guarantee that she probably went off on a tangent and started saying things about how others are generalizing based on these proper, what's the proper word there? See, I'm at a loss.
See, while he's doing that, I will continue with this.
Stereotype. Because of the general stereotype that people tend to make, she's making generalizations that those stereotypes are what's making her look bad, and she was trying to defend herself.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Plain and simple, we could have ended it in 5 words. That general stereotypes by the general populace, at least how we're made to believe, which is another stereotype and cliche, etc.
He's better with words than I am. He's got an education, and he's intelligent.
Thank you. But based on these stereotypes and stuff, she makes use of those and doesn't explain them proper, and therefore trying to explain what other people have told her, she's ended up butchering it to the point that you think that it's her saying it, and it's not.
No,
it's not her thoughts.
Trying to say in my video,
her thoughts are coming from other people.
The stereotypical thing is with my friend who, again, I'm not racist, married a nice Mexican man, as Aaron said, from the Jalisco region.
See, that made no sense. She's talking about herself marrying a Mexican man.
No, I said my friend.
You're obviously talking about your friend, but you said myself, and
no. What I'm saying is my friend, who I know personally, who married a Mexican man from the Jalisco region.
I don't know if he's from Jalisco, but most of the people in this region.
Fine, whatever.
I don't just walk up to people and say, "So, are you from Jalisco, Mexico?"
Anyways, people like her, that's married to him, think people like us should be living in a tent in the desert somewhere and dead while everyone else gets the benefits. Then you hear other people say that other people like us should be dead because they can't.
Just for example, her own aunt has posted things all over her Facebook page about how we need to get rid of welfare and we need to get rid of freeloaders from the system, and that technically these people shouldn't be getting any type of handouts, and we need to do away with all handouts except for Social Security for the retired, because she's getting close to retirement. Her sister has posted very similar things also that basically say that the disabled are using the system and abusing the system, and there isn't a fucking disabled person in the world who isn't able to work in some capacity. I'm sorry, but do you realize that working requires usually that you have to work for another person, and if you can't handle social interactions with another person, what's going to happen if you're bagging groceries and somebody looks at you and says, "Hey, you're putting the corn in the wrong area"? You might get angry, grab the can of corn and throw it again across the grocery store and end up hitting somebody else in the head with it, who ends up filing a suit against you for assault and battery. Now you're in jail because you couldn't handle your anger, or you couldn't handle somebody getting in your face. What if you end up having a boss who comes up to you and says, I prefer that you do that, but since you're not doing that, I'm going to end up blah, blah, blah. And then you see their face all red and they're screaming and yelling at you. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at trying to imitate.
And you pop the guy one in the head with a fist.
No, see? Jumping to conclusions. I was going to go off of my problems. I curl into a ball and start crying and become unresponsive. They could sit there and poke and prod at me all day long, and I could be there for 24 hours in one position. What are you going to do? You're going to have to let that employee go. And since I'd have to work with customers, because usually the jobs where you don't have to work with customers, the thing is, bosses don't work with people's problems. Bosses today, they want to get things done, and the reason that they're bosses is because they want to get things done.
I do want to make a statement on his argument, and it isn't really an argument. There's another thing besides him being curled up in the ball. He's right about bosses don't want to work with people's disabilities. There's one big problem with Aaron And that problem is the boss would never work with him even if they gave him a chance, is because he's got a little dog named Moppy who's under the desk.
It's very hard to work a manual labor job when you only have one arm. Having to have a dog under feet, how am I going to carry a case of, a case of 2 liters? There's 8 2-liters in a case. I used to work at a gas station. But how am I going to carry that with one arm when I have a bad neck, bad shoulder, bad back, a heart condition, and only one arm? You end up overexerting yourself, and you can actually cause yourself to have a heart attack, etc. The more that I heat up, the more that I sweat. Heat is one thing that seems to affect my seizure disorder. Where somebody just recently had talked about, you play video games and you have seizures. They've never affected me. I've talked to my doctor about it, and I've said, hey, they've never affected me. And my doctor said, if they don't affect you, then there's no problem. Go ahead and play them.
However, you did say last night to me when you were waiting.
Yes, there's actually a little thing where the game installs itself in the PlayStation 3 where it's got a green bar. And if it starts going real fast, it starts actually really messing with my head, and I start to feel sick. It's like strobe lights on a cop car. But the frame refresh rate of a video game doesn't affect me. The flashing lights in a video game don't usually affect me. There have been situations in video games where it's like, oh, this scene I can't watch because I've already looked at it and seen it, or I have to cover my eyes and be like, just take a breath. But most video games are not like that to me. It's very, very rare that any video game has ever affected me in the least bit. So, the doctors have told me I can go ahead and play video games, but somebody was like, well, video game playing is, you shouldn't do it if you have a seizure disorder.
I want to defend something here on the video game thing, okay? For the person out there that said, dude, you shouldn't be playing video games. If he doesn't play video games, he has some problems with his mental disability, which is an invisible disability, which will cause him to lose his damn mind. And then I, of course, which have taken care of him many times, and he's done the same.
You can't see it, but I am actually coated in the scars all over my arms. I wish my scars would actually show, but the camera's not high enough quality. I could actually draw a marker on here, and you will see I have scars all over the place because I black out, and the blackout causes physical harm. Some of the deeper ones are up here, but even then you can't see it. I've required stitches about 4 or 5 dozen times, where I've ended up in the hospital needing stitches. And this brings to another. The guy started yelling at me basically for throwing cops under the bus and being rude to cops, and cops don't just hurt people for having seizures. I never said it's because of my seizures. I said that I'm worried about it because of my blackouts, the fact that it has self-harm.
He's a zombie state.
I have been seen by a couple people that I know walking down the street in a manner where I'm like this, and they've stopped and asked, are you okay? And I've just kept on walking. And I'm taking very slow steps. Now, just recently in Cleveland, there was a 12-year-old kid that was shot because they told him to freeze and put his hands up, and he instead started reaching for his BB gun or whatever. And it could be, let me put this down. He was afraid. And they ended up shooting him because they thought it was a real gun, even though people were all around saying, it's a toy gun, don't shoot him. Well, if you're a cop, and just asking your own preference, how you would react to it. If you're a cop in this day and age where we have people who literally will just pull out and open fire because of whatever reason, even though I rarely hear about cops being shot at by a person they're stopping, but it has happened. But you have a person who's walking down the street, who's coated in blood, who is not responsive. You tell them freeze and they keep walking. You tell them to put their hands up, they don't react. You tell them on the ground and they don't even make an action to get on the ground. You tell them to stop and they don't. Are you going to go and grab that person? Because obviously they're coated in blood. How do you know it's their blood? How do you know that it's not because they didn't just kill 15 people in a back alleyway with a knife? You don't know this. How do you know that they didn't receive their injuries trying to rob somebody who ended up shooting them or something? All you know is that they're coated in blood and not responding to you. They could have a weapon. They could end up attacking you just touching them. So your action is going to be to tase or shoot. I don't want to be tased or shot. That's part of why I have a service dog. But the person said that I was being rude to cops and assuming that they would end up tasing or shooting me for having a seizure. That was a misunderstanding. That is not what I said. But they misunderstood, and they had to make a comment about it.
I would like to make a comment about cops. Now, we've been taught in our society not to trust them. Well, with all the bad media and publicity, there's a reason for it. But as Mr. Aaron said to me the other day, how can you trust a cop that's mother calls up to have the kid's medicine taken, and next you know it goes in the
cop goes in and
kid.
shoots the kid? Or not too long ago, I think it was about a year or two ago, there was a cop who shot a autistic kid who wanted to hear the lights in the car again, couldn't get the cop's attention, so he started to get into the cop's car to try to play with the lights and the siren. And the cop ended up grabbing him by the arm, dislocating his arm, arresting the kid, and I think he tased the kid too or shot him. I don't remember the whole story. There was a story not too long ago about a deaf woman who'd managed to call 911, and she ran out of her house to get protection from the cops. Cops seeing a woman running at her that wouldn't listen to them, they opened fire on her and killed her. I'm sorry, but this is the type of thing that happens so often in our day and age. And I'm afraid of police action against me because I'm walking down the street like this. Of course, we've gotten off on a tangent again. This whole thing started with, but it also went into making assumptions of other people.
And our
disabilities again.
So, I got him.
Anyways, this has been 45 minutes, and I'm tired of talking, and I don't know what else to say. And I really hope that my words have not been misunderstood. And I know that they're misunderstood so often. That's why I keep talking and talking and talking. I want to make sure I'm understood, which I don't think makes me any more understandable. But for some reason, that's the way my brain works.
Well,
I overanalyze. I'm overanalytical. And I make too many observations on mankind and how mankind reacts. And, of course, that's making generalizations. But that's my thing. I'm an observer. I don't interact with people usually. I'm better at camera because I get to talk to a camera. But face to face, I'm usually shy, quiet, withdrawn, and I don't talk to people. I usually let her do all the talking. So I guess the video's different for me. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I have nothing further to say. I'll let Rita take it away, and if she's got anything else to add.
Please add and subscribe if you like. Please post comments, feedback, suggestions. Thank you, and may God bless the world.